Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about my updated top 24 tight end rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season, going in depth through every single tight end inside the top 24 and explaining why I have them in each and every single spot and tier inside of my rankings. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you guys leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousSFNTSY. If you'd like access to my PPR and half PPR rankings and cheat sheet, they're available. Link in the video description on the Patreon for $7.50. So without further ado, let's get on in to my top 24 tight end rankings and tiers for the 2024 fantasy football season. We begin with the tight end position inside of the S tier with my tight ends 1 through 3. At number 1, the head of the table, shout out Roman Reigns, we got Travis Kelce, Mr. Swift. Now, last season, where you drafted Travis Kelce inside of the first round, you were immensely disappointed with his production. Despite the fact that he was the tight end 2, and despite the fact that he has been a top 2 tight end from 2016 all the way up until 2023, due to a fall off, a dip down in production, a lot of fantasy football players are going to be a little bit cautious when drafting Travis Kelce this season. But the reason why they are nervous, to me, doesn't really make a lot of sense. Travis Kelce did end up hyperextending his knee in preseason, missing a few games to start off last season, only playing in 15 games. And I believe the fact that he hyperextended his knee led to his downfall in terms of production. This is a guy that is on the best offense in the NFL, and he is the best tight end in the National Football League, and his quarterback is the best quarterback in the NFL. We don't need to make fantasy football uber complicated. We don't need to overthink every single aspect of the game. If you want to rank Travis Kelce as the tight end 2 instead of the tight end 1, go right ahead, but Travis Kelce is going to be my tight end 1. He had 984 yards last year, over 120 targets, but he only had 5 touchdowns. Prior to last season, his normal was around 8 to 10 touchdowns, so I believe that Travis Kelce will hop back on the saddle, John Marston style, and dominate 50 Shades of Grey style this season. I think Travis Kelce is a shoo-in to be the tight end number 1, and I think a lot of people are really overthinking him. At number 2, we got Sam Laporta, who was the tight end number 1 in his rookie year. Now, had you have listened to me entering into your fantasy football drafts last season, you would have been banging the drum for Sam Laporta, just like me, snagged him late, and he would have been potentially the reason as to why you won your league. The reason why I got Sam Laporta ranked number 2 instead of number 1 is because Sam Laporta kind of luck boxed into 10 touchdowns last season on a loaded Detroit Lions offense. Now, could he score 10 touchdowns again and finish as the tight end number 1? 100% due to how good the Lions offense is and due to the skill of Sam Laporta, but I would rather go back to old reliable Travis Kelce as my tight end 1, who I think should score 10 touchdowns, whereas if Sam Laporta scores just 8, he'll probably end up being just the tight end 2, which again, you should be very excited about. At number 3, we got Trey McBride, tight end of the Arizona Cardinals. Last season, Trey McBride entered into the year as the tight end 2 on the team with Zach Ertz as the tight end number 1. Zach Ertz ends up going down. He's yelling timber, and Trey McBride ends up having a fantastic finish to the season with multiple games that were 15 plus points. The consistency this season, I think, will be a lot more there due to Kyler Murray being even more healthy and due to the fact that they bring in Marvin Harrison Jr., who is going to be able to make this team be able to move the ball a lot more efficiently. So having a more healthy Kyler Murray, having Marvin Harrison Jr. there is a recipe for success for this offense. I believe Trey McBride is definitely a top 5 tight end in terms of skill set. At the National Football League level, he is a great red zone threat. He had 106 targets last year. I think he's going to build on that. I think the Cardinals are going to be a better team, and I'm a huge fan of Kyler Murray. I'm a huge fan of what Trey McBride did down the stretch of last season. His utilization is incredibly high, and I think he belongs inside of the S tier at the tight end position. Moving into the A tier, this is where we have a big group of guys. Tight ends 4 through 8. At number 4, we have Mark Andrews. Now, sadly, Mark Andrews ended up getting into a car accident about a week or two ago, and he did end up returning to practice on Friday, so there's really nothing to worry about. Obviously, when you read car accident, it doesn't make you the most confident, but since he did end up practicing, this is really just kind of a non-news blurb at this point. Mark Andrews has been one of the most consistent tight ends in fantasy football since 2019, being a top 6 tight end every single season, outside of last year where he only played in 10 games. When Mark Andrews is healthy, he's going to be one of the best tight ends in fantasy football, and that is without a doubt. Now, I understand they bring in Zay Flowers in the draft last season, so it doesn't make Mark Andrews the clear, undisputed #1 target in this offense like in years prior, but he's a guy that should be ticking off around 110 to 125 targets. Back in 2021, he ripped off 153 targets. The Baltimore Ravens offense should be impeccable. They should be bending teams over the table. So ranking Mark Andrews anywhere outside the top 5 is pretty crazy. At number 5, we got Kyle Pitts. Now, between Kyle Pitts, my tight end 5, and Dalton Kincaid, my tight end number 6, I have a debate about these guys all the time in my head. If you wanted to flip Dalton Kincaid over Kyle Pitts, then you can go right ahead and do that. Now, I understand Kyle Pitts has been a complete and utter fucking disgrace to fantasy football ever since his rookie year where he was the tight end 5. After that, tight end 31 and tight end 14 last season. But the reason why I believe heavily in Kyle Pitts is because of his skill set. We have bought in for years. Some of you guys might have been buying in for his whole fucking career. I bought in last year and was wrong, but Kyle Pitts, coming out of college, the Gators, chomp, who just got chomped up by my Miami Hurricanes yesterday. Kyle Pitts looked incredible. He looked like this generational tight end prospect, and the coaching, the system, the play calling, the quarterback sunk his battleship. But I believe in 2024, with Cole's Cash, Kirk Cousins, with a new offensive coordinator, a new head coach, the ceiling is tight end 1 for Kyle Pitts. He's only scored a grand total of 6 touchdowns in his whole entire career combined. 1, 2, and 3. As easy as 1, 2, 3, like the Jackson 5 song from 2021 to 2023. This year, I think he's going to potentially score 6 fucking touchdowns or even more this season alone. Again, I think Kyle Pitts, in terms of skill set, is one of the best tight ends in the NFL. He is a freak athlete, and I'm just going to buy back in due to the quarterback situation and the coaching situation being a lot better. At number 6, we got Dalton Kincaid. As a rookie last year, he was the tight end number 13 in PPR. This season, he clearly moves ahead of Dawson Knox one time, if you are with me, as the tight end 1 on the team. Now, Dawson Knox is not going to do a complete and utter disappearing act like his name was Houdini, but I also don't think that this is going to be a Rob Gronkowski and Aaron Hernandez situation, minus all of the murder, of course. I think Dalton Kincaid is the clear tight end 1 on this roster. Losing Stephon Diggs, I think, definitely gives a bump up to Dalton Kincaid, as this wide receiver core is incredibly suspect. Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakira. Oh, baby, when you talk like that, it's just not really the best wide receiver core on earth. So I think Dalton Kincaid will heavily benefit from that. Over 100 targets is clearly in the sight for Dalton Kincaid this season. Only 2 touchdowns last year. I think he ends up getting a little bit luckier this season. Next up, we move to Evan Ingram. Now, Evan Ingram's one of my favorite tight ends to watch, as Evan Ingram has done a complete and utter 180 on his career. If you guys remember, on the New York Football Giants, everyone loved to make fun of Evan Ingram because outside of his rookie year, where the guy was downright fucking incredible, tight end 4 in PPR, he started to have a fall off like Humpty Dumpty off the wall. Everyone was making fun of Evan Ingram. The guy had butterfingers. He couldn't catch anything. You could hand the ball off to him, and he would somehow drop it. He could get a check down fucking screen like he's Devon Achane or Austin Eckler or something, and he would somehow drop the ball, right? But ever since he's been a Jacksonville Jaguar, he completely shed that narrative back-to-back seasons as a top 5 tight end. So, Nick, why do you have him ranked outside of the top 5? Strictly due to his upside. He's a target hog. He had 143 fucking targets last year, but The most amount of touchdowns he scored was 6 back in 2017, his rookie year as a Giant, and he's had back-to-back years with just 4 touchdowns in Jacksonville. They bring in Brian Thomas Jr., they bring in Gabe Davis, they still have Christian Kirk, so it's not like the team is scarce with red zone threats, especially with Brian Thomas Jr. there, and especially with Travis Etienne looking a lot better inside of the red zone. So if Evan Ingram scores 4 touchdowns again, and maybe his targets, receptions drop off just slightly, he probably finishes outside the top 5. He feels like an incredibly safe pick, though. Evan Ingram is one of the safer tight ends. I would argue he's a lot safer than a guy like Kyle Pitts, but I just don't think the upside is there due to his touchdowns really never being super voluptuous like Violet Myers' ass. At number 8, we got George Kittle Me Timbers, tight end of the San Francisco 49ers, top 5 tight end in 3 straight seasons. Though that doesn't really tell the tale of the season for George Kittle, because if you are a George Kittle owner, you draft George Kittle, you know just how frustrating it is. There are games where George Kittle is doing his best IHOP worker impression. He's just laying out pancakes, right? He's blocking motherfuckers, making people look silly, sending these sorry players that try to stop him straight into the ground, and then he laughs in their face, right? George Kittle is a very likable player. He's got a lot of funny clips where he just does all this crazy shit on the field. He is a freak of nature. But what that leads to is a lot of situations where George Kittle is just blocking all game, right? He's chilling, doesn't really have too many targets, and he has like 3 or 4 fantasy points. But then there's the games where it's like, hey, let's get George Kittle involved, like up against the Cowboys last season in prime time when the motherfucker had like 3 touchdowns in that game, and he goes crazy, he goes ballistic, but then he goes silent like the night when old Saint Nick shows up, right? So it's pretty interesting having George Kittle. He is kind of an all-or-nothing tight end. He is probably going to score 3 to 5 points a bunch of times this season, but he's also going to have those huge games that potentially win you your week, which leads me to have him as the tight end number 8. Week in and week out, it is hard to deny his talent. It is hard to rank him due to the fluctuity, the amount of fluctuation week in and week out with his production. If he was just magically forgot how to block and the team wanted to use him like Kelsey or something, the guy would probably be the tight end number 1 in my rankings. Moving now into the B tier, we got just one guy here, and that is Jake Ferguson, Fergalicious of the Dallas Cowboys. Jake Ferguson last year was his first year really being the guy, kind of like how Trey McBride was able to shed past Zach Ertz due to the injury. Jake Ferguson becomes the guy in 2023 after having a not so hot season in 2022 just because he didn't really have a lot of volume. Last year he had 102 targets, 71 receptions, 761 receiving yards, and 5 total touchdowns. In the offseason, the Dallas Cowboys do virtually nothing to address the offense outside of bringing in fat boy Ezekiel Elliott. So they don't really bring in a lot of target competition for CeeDee Lamb for Jake Ferguson. So it's very clear that the guy's going to have over 100 targets. If he's able to increase his touchdown total past 5, there's a guy that could definitely finish inside the top 5 at the tight end position, which is what puts a tier gap here between him and the guys below him. Pause. I'm a big fan of Jake Ferguson. A lot of people will argue against his potential upside due to he never really had that many crazy games last season. But if you watch the game up against the Packers, despite the fact that the Dallas Cowboys got spit roasted in that game, Jake Ferguson had a big one, and I think he has that upside in any given game. Again, due to the low amount of other players that are going to be seeing a bunch of targets on this team, it definitely helps out Jake Ferguson a ton. Moving into the C tier, we got David Njoku, Brock Bowers, and Pat Freiermuth. Now, David Njoku was a league winner last year. Once Deshaun Watson went down for the count, then we ended up seeing the emergence of David Njoku with cool Joe Flacco. David Njoku was amazing down the stretch of last season, putting up a bunch of huge performances. The problem is David Njoku's numbers with Deshaun Watson are mightily suppressed. They are very, very bad. Now, that is not to say that David Njoku won't be involved. That is not to say that David Njoku can overcome the absolute bullshit that is Deshaun Watson as the starting quarterback of the Browns. Maybe Deshaun Watson gets better, and maybe the reason why David Njoku was eating last year was because of how the scheme was. They were trying to scheme him up to get him more targets. That is entirely possible. So I'm kind of at a crossroads here. I think like the finisher from Cody Rhodes. I am sitting here thinking David Njoku is incredibly talented. I am thinking that David Njoku could be a top 5 tight end, but I'm also saying, hey, when push comes to shove, last year showed us that Deshaun Watson didn't target him as much high of a rate. The targets weren't as good. The touchdowns weren't as good. So it kind of leaves me like, hey, David Njoku could break free from this, but there's also a chance that Deshaun Watson is his ultimate demise. At number 11, we got Brock Bowers, tight end of the Las Vegas Raiders. This dude was crazy in college. This dude was legitimately dominant game in and game out, the best tight end in the country at Georgia, and he looks like the clear tight end 1 in Las Vegas. They still have another tight end there who they're going to use. But Brock Bowers is the guy. Brock Bowers, there have been reports about wanting to use him to get him in the slot, use him in positions to get him the easy targets, and that is going to be chef's kiss, magnifique for his production. The biggest problem is he's on the Raiders. Biggest problem with the Raiders, for one, they suck. For two, they want to run the ball a lot. For three, they've got Devontae Adams, who sucks in targets with the efficiency of Julia Ann. So while I like Brock Bowers a ton as a talent, there's always the, hey, he's a rookie. Rookie tight ends typically aren't the best, right? So he's got that going against him. He also has the, hey, Gardner Minshew isn't that great. Or, hey, if they bench Gardner Minshew, then you get Aiden O'Connell, who also isn't that great. But there's also that other narrative that is Brock Bowers is really fucking good. Brock Bowers go burr. Brock Bowers is going to be able to elevate himself over the bullshit of the offense. With them wanting to run the ball so much, it does kind of make me pessimistic on Brock Bowers, but I couldn't rank him outside of the top 12 due to the upside that he has and due to just how great the player is. At number 12, we got Pat Freiermuth. Now, Pat Freiermuth starts off his career looking all fine and dandy in his rookie year. He has a better second season, but he only scores 2 touchdowns in 2022. Then 2023, he's hurt. He's not looking the best. He's down for the count, and he's the tight end 30. I think a bounce back is imminent here. Arthur Smith offenses love the tight end position, despite the production out of Kyle Pitts last year. But if you guys remember, Jonnu Smith was having a bunch of great games. But I digress. Pat Freiermuth is a very talented tight end. Now, question is, do we believe in Arthur Smith, and do we believe in Russell Wilson and Justin Fields? I think it's ultimately going to be probably a 50-50 season where Russ plays 50% of the games and Justin Fields plays the other 50%, unless Mr. Unlimited turns back the clock and ends up playing like vintage Seattle Seahawks Russ from like 2016, something like that. So Pat Freiermuth, you know, George Pickens is there and they don't have many other targets, right? They have other guys there, but no one up to the ability of a guy like Freiermuth or up to the ability of a guy like Pickens. Now, they also have another tight end there, Darnell Washington, Beard. Shout out to Key and Peele. But Pat Freiermuth, very talented player. Again, we've said the word talented a million times, but these guys are all very talented. It's just a question of targets. I think the targets will be there. And I think Arthur Smith really likes tight ends. Who doesn't? But I think that them using a lot of 2 tight end sets will be beneficial to getting the rock into the hands of Pat Freiermuth. But the clear reason why is he not ranked higher than if Arthur Smith does this, Arthur Smith does that, this, that, the other thing. The biggest downfall is, again, Arthur Smith and the fact that Russell Wilson just really isn't all that good. Moving on into the D tier, we got tight ends 13 all the way through tight ends 17. At number 13, we got Dallas Goddard. Before we talk about Dallas Goddard some more, though, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you guys leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton, and I would like to give you guys a word from our partner over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, if you don't know what Underdog Fantasy is, they're the best place to play best ball fantasy football this summer, and if you still have that itch to do some more fantasy football drafts, you can head on over to Underdog Fantasy and check out the Marathon Contest. $15 to enter $300,000 to first place. If you don't know what best ball fantasy football is, which is what Underdog Fantasy is, it's the best way to play fantasy football because it's the draft and that's it. There's no waivers, no trades, and no in-season management. At the end of every single week, Underdog Fantasy will put in the highest scores into your lineup for you, so you never have to worry about it, and you can follow it all season long. If you're new to Underdog Fantasy and use promo code Notorious or click on the link in the video description, you will receive a special pick for week 1, as well as up to $1,000 in bonus cash. Again, if you're a first-time depositor, using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description. Moving now back on into the video, Dallas Goedert's my tight end number 13. He is probably going to finish as the tight end number 12, but I don't have him ranked higher due to the fact that he's another guy with very limited upside. He has A.J. Brown in the offense, he has Devontae Smith in the offense, he has Saquon Barkley, and he also has Jalen Hurts. All these guys are going to be ripping touchdowns out of Dallas Goedert's hands. The guy has scored at maximum 5 touchdowns, and that was back in 2019. 3 touchdowns in back-to-back seasons, so he's probably going to have about 600 to 700 yards again, 3 touchdowns, and finish as the tight end number 12. I can't really rank him much lower because he's going to finish probably as a top 12 tight end, but I can't rank him higher because the upside really isn't there. The ceiling isn't there. Dalton Schultz is my tight end number 14, 3 straight years as a top 10 tight end, but he scored 5 touchdowns, but there's no real but important there. 3 straight years with 5 or more touchdowns. Last season, he was a Houston Texan. Prior to that, he was on the Dallas Cowboys. Pretty solid. Again, another guy with kind of capped upside due to how many wide receivers are on the Houston Texans. And Nick, don't you know Travis Kelce's on a team with like 3 great receivers? Three solid receivers? The difference is Travis Kelce's Travis Kelce and Dalton Schultz is Dalton Schultz. Again, this isn't meant to take a shit on the chest of Dalton Schultz's name and give him a good old Cleveland Steamer special. But that's just kind of how I feel about him. He's going to score the touchdowns. He has some solid touchdown upside, but he's never going to get over 100 targets. His targets will probably dip due to the addition of Diggs. So, tight end 13, 14 range feels fair to him. At number 15, we have Luke Musgrave. Now, I, for one, am a little bit worried about Tucker Kraft Mac and Cheese being available to go in week 1 and potentially ruining the upside of Luke Musgrave. I think they're going to use a lot of Musgrave. They're going to use a lot of Tucker Kraft, and it's probably going to be a bit frustrating to figure out who to start week in and week out, but whoever ends up becoming the guy, once we figure that out, that is when the true value will come if they end up bumping up the snaps. I think in terms of week 1, Musgrave will be the guy, and Musgrave, while he didn't have a crazy amount of touchdowns last year, did have a solid amount of targets for a rookie, very solid profile out of college. So, Musgrave, I think, belongs in this tier. At number 16, we got Cole Kmet. Now, Cole Kmet used to really just have target competition from DJ Moore. Now they bring in Rome Odunze. Now they bring in Keenan Allen. This is a guy that I could see scoring, though, a bunch of touchdowns because I think the Bears are going to turn things into overdrive. Best season of his career last year as the tight end number 7. Again, though, the addition of all those other wide receivers kind of moves him down. To close out the tier number 5, the D tier here, we got Cade Otton, tight end of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Cade Otton has never really had a great fantasy season as he's been the tight end 22 and the tight end 20, but he is a guy that in the correct matchups can really pop off. I think this will be the year where he ends up getting more targets. Not a guy that I am in love with, not a guy that I'm going to give the Gawk 9000 special to, but Baker's a good enough quarterback to be able to elevate Otton. Moving now to tier number 6, we got just one guy in here, and that is TJ Hawkinson. Now, TJ Hawkinson tears his ACL and MCL on December 24th last season. Merry fucking Christmas to you, Mr. Hawkinson. That sucked, obviously. Probably going to miss the first 6 to 7, 8 games of the season. He's on the IR now, so he's definitely missing the first 4. TJ Hawkinson on Detroit, fucking nasty. TJ Hawkinson on Minnesota, nasty, amazing, top 3 tight end in back-to-back seasons. He's been a top 3 tight end in 3 of the last 4 seasons. The only season where he didn't do that was back in 2021 when he only played in 12 games. Problem with Hawkinson, he's hurt. He's hurt. So if you don't have an IR spot, it makes it very hard to draft him. When he comes back, it might be a bit of an ease-in process, a bit of the just-the-tip technique. He gets a downgraded quarterback from Goff as well as from Mr. Kirk Cousins, now going to Sam Darnold, the mono man himself. So it makes it kind of, it puts me in a box here. He misses half the season. They take him a couple weeks to ramp him up. That's not great. But we can't bury him too much. We can't dig him a fucking hole and have him sleep in it, because when he's healthy, he's really good. If you're in a league with no IR spot, don't draft him. If you're in a league with an IR spot, go ahead and stash him. When he comes back, though, he'll probably heavily bump up my rankings. He'll probably be like a top 8, top 10 guy every single week. But again, coming into the draft process, it's hard for me to want to select him, especially when there's so many high upside guys in that range at other positions. And if I'm keeping it a buck with you guys, most of the time I'm taking the guys in the S tier, the A tier, the B tier, and then just never worrying about tight end. Whereas if you take an Njoku type, pairing him with Hawkinson makes a whole lot of sense. Moving on into the F tier, we have tight ends 19, 20, 21, 22, and 23, just one tight end inside of the G tier. Would have been funny if we had 6 in there, because it would have been the G6. Ha, like a G6, not. Okay, that was a shitty joke. So Hunter Henry feels like going to be a top 20 tight end, as he always is. Feels like Jacoby Brissett, Drake May, not really the best for Hunter Henry, but they also don't have like an amazing, clear, locked and loaded #1 fucking alpha wide receiver on their team. Been banged up. That's not really the best, but he's the best tight end on the team. The Patriots will probably suck to high heaven. So tight end anywhere from 18, 20, that range feels fair. Tyler Conklin, tight end 20, tight end 18 last year. Now he gets Aaron Rodgers, a legit quarterback. Conklin's another one of those guys that's kind of a sneaky waiver wire pickup in positive matchups due to his ability to be like a top 10, top 12, top 8 tight end in certain matchups. Very up and down, very hit or miss. Just feels like, hey, Rodgers should be able to bump him up to be inside the top 20. At number 21, we got Noah Fant. Now, the Seattle Seahawks no longer have a million fucking tight ends around him, so that's a big positive for him. A downfall, though, is the amazing wide receivers around him and the fact that Geno Smith kind of sucks. Noah Fant has been let down by his quarterback play his whole career, and that'll probably end up being the case yet again this season. Next up, we move to Juwan Johnson. Juwan Johnson, the clear tight end 1 on the team, though they will be using Taysom Hill as well. Juwan Johnson's biggest wart on his profile has nothing to do with him, and it is a big fucking wart like Lubert in iCarly. It's Derek Carr, who absolutely sucks ass. So Juwan Johnson, talented player, shitty offense. Can't really rank him higher than this. At number 23, we got Chig Okonkwo, tight end of the Tennessee Titans. They bring in Calvin Ridley in the offseason. They're going to throw the ball a lot more, which makes me a lot more optimistic about Chig, who had a bunch of solid games in 2022. Not as hot, though, in 2023. A big letdown to a lot of fantasy football players. Feels like a pretty mass selection. Again, I'm going fast, super fast mode, like an old school only use me blade video, due to the fact that no one is really drafting these guys, so we don't really need to sit here and talk about them too much. Ben Sinnott is the Sam Laporta pick, right? The guy that could be what Sam Laporta was last season. Why can he do that? Because he's very talented. What's holding him back? The fact that he's not really the locked and loaded tight end, right? They talk about using him as a fullback. They talk about how his blocking is so great, which could really hold him back. Not a lot of target competition, though, over there in Washington. So I think Ben Sinnott will find his way. But I was also super confident on Sam Laporta last year, ranked him much higher than this. So while he is the Sam Laporta prospect type, the guy that in his rookie year can make a whole lot of noise, like banging a bunch of pots and pans. But what I will say is not as great of a situation, and it's a lot more unsure of what his usage is going to look like. Whereas Laporta, we knew, hey, he was going to get a lot of usage because everyone in training camp was just fucking sucking on his glizzy like his name was Joey Chestnut. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you guys did end up enjoying today's video, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button like it owes you money. Leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Make sure you guys check out the Patreon if you want the rankings for your draft. If you're drafting today, you're drafting tomorrow, you might want those. So I love you guys all so much. Have a great one. As always, good boy.